It was supposed to be a quiet morning, but then black SUVs rolled up. Lights flashing. Men in uniforms stormed out, badges on their chests, radios crackling with fake authority. They pounded on the door of a black man's home, shouting that he had minutes to leave. To the neighbors, it looked real. It looked terrifying, but the paperwork was fake. The badges were fake. These weren't police. They were hired enforcers, mercenaries of a corrupt HOA trying to steal his house. They expected fear. They expected compliance. What they didn't expect were 6 former Navy SEALs waiting inside. And when the door opened, the hunters became the hunted. Darius Williams had built his life brick by brick. A veteran who had served his country with honor, he now lived in a quiet neighborhood on land that had been passed down through his family. To him, his house wasn't just a shelter. It was history, roots, legacy, but to the Homeowners Association, it was an opportunity. They saw prime real estate. They wanted control. They wanted profit. And so the letters began. Complaints about the length of his grass, the color of his siding, the truck in his driveway. Fines stacked higher and higher. These weren't rules meant to keep order. They were meant to be weapons that would break him. This wasn't about paint or lawns. It was about erasure, the same quiet erasure that had stolen black families' homes and land for generations. Darius refused to bow. He refused to pay money he didn't owe, and that's when things got darker. Strange cars idled outside. Men took photos of his house. Harassing phone calls came in the middle of the night. The sheriff brushed him off, saying it was a civil matter, but Darius knew better. He knew they were building toward something. What he didn't know was how far they would go. Until the morning, the SUVs pulled up. The fake officers marched to his door, pounding with fists and shouting commands. They flashed forged badges, thrust fake eviction papers at his window, and warned that if he didn't come out, they'd drag him out. To neighbors watching, it looked terrifying. It looked real. But Darius had already prepared. He'd seen the harassment escalate, and he had made a few calls of his own. To 6 brothers in arms. Former Navy SEALs, men who knew how to turn fear into discipline. While the mercenaries barked orders outside, 6 shadows waited inside, calm, silent, patient. One of the fake cops raised his baton, threatening to smash the door. Darius gave a single nod. That was the signal. 2 SEALs slipped quietly out the back, circling wide. 2 more flanked from the sides. And before the imposters knew it, they weren't surrounding Darius anymore. They were surrounded themselves. The hunters had no idea the trap had already closed around them. One SEAL called out, his voice calm, commanding, "Drop it! Hands up!" The mercenaries spun, startled, realizing these weren't frightened neighbors. They were trained warriors. They tried to bluff, insisting they were authorized. But the SEALs checked the paperwork. It was riddled with errors. They checked the badges. They were cheap knockoffs. The illusion crumbled in seconds. This wasn't the law. This wasn't justice. It was a thief dressed in uniform. A modern mask for an old injustice. Neighbors who had been hiding began to step outside, phones recording. The truth was no longer in the shadows. Every second was being documented. The mercenaries grew desperate, but their threats meant nothing now. They were exposed, then came the sirens. Real sirens this time. Sheriff's deputies pulled up to flashing lights and chaos. But instead of a lawful eviction, they found a crime scene. Men in fake uniforms, counterfeit badges, forged paperwork, weapons without permits. The SEALs stepped back, letting the law do its work. The fake officers were cuffed one by one, their confidence broken, their scam revealed in front of the whole neighborhood. And when investigators followed the trail, the truth spilled out. The HOA board had orchestrated everything. They'd used HOA funds to hire mercenaries, trying to intimidate Darius into giving up his home. They had ties to developers who promised kickbacks once the land was seized. What began as harassment over grass length was now exposed as a conspiracy worth millions. The courtroom battle that followed was brutal. But this time, Darius wasn't alone. His evidence, his recordings, and his witnesses, neighbors, veterans, even the SEALs themselves, painted an undeniable picture. The judge's gavel fell. The eviction was ruled illegal. The board's actions were criminal. Damages were awarded, enough to bankrupt the HOA, enough to end the careers of everyone involved. The corrupt HOA was dissolved. Its leaders faced charges, the mercenaries faced prison, and the neighborhood that once lived in fear began to breathe freely again. Darius's home stood untouched, stronger than ever. Not just because the house was his, but because it had become something greater, a symbol. He used his settlement money to start a foundation for veterans and families targeted by predatory HOAs. His story spread through news outlets, legal circles, and community groups. Others who thought they had no power began to fight back, armed with his blueprint. And the Six Seals? They kept coming back. Brothers in arms, now brothers in justice. Their presence reminded everyone that loyalty, honor, and courage don't vanish when the uniform comes off. This was never just about a house. It was about dignity, about standing against the machinery of quiet theft that too often targets the powerless. At sunset, Darius stood on his porch, looking out at the street where fake cops once tried to break him. He smiled, not in triumph, but in vindication, because the truth had won. But one question lingers. How many others have lost their homes without warriors to stand beside them? So I ask you, if men in fake uniforms showed up at your door, would you know how to fight back?